Good morning, Aurora, and everybody else. Thanks for attending. Today's seminar is going to be specifically on how to simplify modeling. This is my own technique that I've developed over the years that I think will help you immensely in terms of modeling and fixing problems you may be having developing models. Uh, the concept here is using groups, components, layers, and scenes. And I'll go through that specifically, but the idea here is to isolate geometry in your model so you don't create a situation where I guess some of you may have had it, some may have not, but this essentially isolates different geometry and allows you to not create a mess with your model. In other words, make your model work for you instead of you working for the model. So we'll look at first an example of what I'm talking about. This is a project I've done, a small office building, and what you'll notice is across the top of the screen there are scenes, which are these tabs. And these scenes basically allow me to show what I want to show to a client and also allow me to work more easily in the model. The scenes save whether groups are in the model, whether layers are on, whether the sun is on. So this is an easy way to develop a model that works good for you and works good for your client. This is just a simple perspective. Have an axon tab, which gives me a different view. Now what scenes are saving is the viewpoint. They're saving what layers are off and on, how the sun is acting, what style you're working with, and whether shadows or fog are on. So a quick way to move through your model, you don't have to remember what each scene you want to be. So site plan, again, straight up view, parallel projection from the top, foundation plan. These are the kind of drawings that you would either export to AutoCAD or export to layout. So what's happening here is we're creating drawings that we can reuse later without having to fidget around and get back to this. So what is this? This is a section cut through the foundation. The rest of the building up above is invisible, and it's in parallel projection. Camera is set to parallel projection, and we're in top view. So standard views, you went to, I think unfortunately this thing is across my screen. Let me see if I can drag this down. There we go. If you go to camera, you have standard views. This is the top view, so a plan, if you will. Without both the parallel projection being set and without one of those standard views being set, you will not get this dead flat drawing. Don't try to do it on your own, it's not going to work. So make sure you set both of those. There's a column plan, which essentially now shows the columns in the building and the exterior walls. A floor plan. What's happening here is different layers are being turned off or on. In this case, the layer for the interior walls and the exterior walls, more detailed, is turned on. We'll get into what that means. Furniture plan. The furniture here is on a separate layer. So what's really happened from that plan previous and this plan is that the furniture has simply been turned on. That layer has been turned on. Roof framing, very similar. Everything but the roof framing is turned off. Roof plan. A front elevation. So these are views. So keep in mind that SketchUp with scenes, and this is key in this whole process, saves the settings that you have when you made that scene. You can change them, you're not stuck with them, but this is a way to work quickly. So rather than me orbiting and moving around in the model using the mouse, I can just click on a scene tab and it takes me where I want to go. Rear elevation, again, can be exported to AutoCAD or layout. For those of you not familiar with layout, it's SketchUp's version of 2D presentation. In other words, flat drawings like you might do in AutoCAD. Section. So that's a section cut through the building. In this particular situation, the section cut is active. So what's happening is the scene remembers that. Opposite section, the connection that's in the building. So these are all just preset to where I want it to go. Framing for the skylights, the skylight detail. Now this one's kind of nice because what I want to show you with this is you can isolate just one section of the model. So here we're going to look at just the skylights. So for example, here I want to just work on skylights. Everything else is gone. It's out of my way. So what's happening there is all those layers that everything else is on are turned off. And the skylight layer is left on. You can see that here in the layers dialog box. These little boxes here, if you check them, that turns a layer off or on. And you can see the only one that's on here is skylights. This, by the way, is SketchUp 2016, so if it looks maybe a little different, it'll look different than anything prior to it. Works, for the most part, the same as 2015. I have some interior shots, which will take a second to generate here. Be patient, it will come. There we go. So this is an interior view of the building. Here the sunlight is turned on. All the parts of the building are turned on, so everything can be visible here. The idea here, I set this up so I can create a view that I'm going to use later for rendering. Once I've got this set up, it's nice to create a scene to save that. Gallery space in the other direction. So you can see how fast it is. I don't have to zoom, pan, orbit, or any of that. This is a drawing, little support that goes out on the canopy. I isolated that separate so I could use that in layout. Interior elevations. Interior elevation of another wall. And this is a line work from a section. Hopefully this shows up. There it is. I'll get into this somewhat later in the seminar series, but this basically is extracted from the model. It's what's called make a group of section cut. So that's the idea. Quickly be able to move through your model, and you can use this to work on it. Once you have this scene, you can move this around. There's nothing that you can't do normally, but the scene is going to be maintained. If I put this is in parallel projection, I put this in perspective, you'll get to see this a little better. So you can see from this section cut that literally the whole building is there. I've built the entire project in this model. So how do you do this? That's what I want to show you today. I'm going to go ahead and lose this. So groups, components, layers, and scenes. That's what you've just seen. I do seminars for the same situation for layout, or excuse me, for SketchUp, and the main thing I try to teach is this particular direction of modeling. So let's go to one that we're actually going to work on. So this is indicative, a little smaller and maybe a little easier to understand, of how the system works. You can see along the top there are the same scene tabs, and I'll run through them quickly so you can see what we're talking about. What I want to do today is actually go through the process. We'll build a model that you can see how this works. So foundation plan, that's actually the foundation just to work on. So say I wanted to work on the foundation. This particular scene has been set up so everything else is gone. So I can work in here all I want and change this. Let's say I want to change this particular thing. Maybe I want to put a beam over here, and I'll pull this through. Okay, what I want you to understand about scenes is it has really nothing to do with the model itself. Scenes just record what it is you ask it to record. So the model, when you make a scene or you change this particular scene, you can see the beam shows up there. I changed the model, but the scene is still the same. If you have questions about this is one of the little kind of quirky things about this. And I've had several questions about what are you talking about? First floor. So here there's a layer for the first floor. It's been turned on. The foundation layer is still there. Okay, so we're going back and forth. Second floor is turned on. So what's happening here, what I want you to understand is this is being built in parts. The first floor on this, get to it, is a group. The second floor is a group, and we'll show you how to build groups. So that's the idea of a group. What's happening there is I've associated the entire second floor together in a group. Same with the first floor. Same with this porch. If I want to work on the kitchen, I've made a seam that takes me right to the kitchen. So you can see how quickly you can move around in the model without panning, orbiting. You don't have to do any of this stuff. Sure, you'll do some of it still, but see how quickly you can move. This is an option for a gable roof, and I also have an option for a flat roof. What's happening here is that gable roof is on a layer called gable roof, and the flat roof is on a layer called flat roof. And all that's really happening is the gable roof layer is being turned off when the flat roof layer is on, and vice versa. What that gives you the opportunity to do is to model variations in exactly the same place. So you don't have to recreate models or erase things. So the roof is a group. The whole thing is a group, by the way. One of the seminars I taught, I had a guy come up afterwards and say, you know, I think everything in your model is a group or component. And I said, absolutely. That's exactly right. When you do that, you eliminate the possibility of messing with things in your model that you definitely did not intend to change. So again, flat roof. If you're not familiar with groups and components, you can see how the whole thing's highlighted in blue. That means you selected a group or a component. To get out of it, just click off to the side. Any place in the model where there's nothing there. Front elevation, so this has been preset with the parallel projection and front view. Here's the same elevation with the flat roof, so gable roof, flat roof. And this is really great for clients because I had a client one time who said, husband said to me, I want a flat roof, and the wife said, there's no way you're getting that. So my solution was, okay, here's one, here's the other. You guys decide. You can cut sections, as you saw in the previous model. This will give you the interior view, kind of the dollhouse thing. Again, with the gable roof, with the flat roof. And I didn't do a whole lot of drawing to change that. Actually, I drew that flat roof once, and it shows up in all these different scenes. So what I want to do is run through how exactly did I get there. Probably not going to be quite as complex a model because we don't have quite the amount of time, but I'll go through the process for you. Okay, so you know what I'm going to do? Actually, I'm going to open a different drawing. I can get rid of this one. There we go. I'll get rid of this one this way. And get rid of that one. We'll open a new drawing here altogether. So bear with me for a second. So if you have any questions at this point, it's a really great time to ask them while I'm opening this drawing. Nothing, huh? Okay, I must be so intensely clear. This time I'm opening 2015 just so you can see the difference. 16, if you notice, there were tabs along the side, and in 15 those tabs are actually under the window menu. I'll move this down too. There we go. Come on, baby. Do what you're supposed to do, right? I'm going to stretch this out just a little bit. Okay, so this is 15. And to go through the process, what I want to show you is that will build the model, and my idea behind this is to organize it as you go. So I want to create a first floor for a house. I'm going to stretch this out this way so you can see everything. I'm just having a little issue with getting all this on the screen at the same time. Let's build a house similar to the one that you just saw in this particular view. Get that. So we'll do something similar to that. I've tried to keep it simple so the process can be seen and not the modeling, if you will. All right, first thing to do for me is to create a layer that I'm looking for, let's say the first floor. I want to draw on that layer. So if I go to Window and Layers, in 16 you can see 16 is kind of peeking out here over the side. That would be over here on the right side in tabs. Quite honestly, I'm a little not crazy about that. Initially when you open Layers, this window is going to show up. So Window, Layers, and you're going to see Layer 0. That's SketchUp's default layer. You can't get rid of that. If you don't set up any other layers, you're going to be drawing on Layer 0. And what I'm going to propose to you is to draw on the layer that you intend the elements to be on. If you don't understand layers, we'll get into that. I'll show you exactly what that means. So you hit the plus button, you get Layer 1, it just assigns a name. We're going to assign a name First Floor to this. And what I recommend to you is type in First Floor with a 1 and 1 ST instead of FIRST, because this particular box alphabetizes things, and if you had first floor with an F and second floor with an S, they're not going to be next to each other. So use numbers, as they will alphabetize very nicely. To work on this layer, there's a little radio button next to first floor, and just click on that. What that means is you're going to be drawing on that layer. If you notice up here, this is called a Layers Manager, so that's Window Layers. There's also a Windows toolbar, which is this guy right up here. And what this basically does is show you what layer you're working on, and it gives you the opportunity here, if you click that little down button, to move things from one layer to another. It's very simple. You select the items you want, pick the layer you'd like here, and it's on that new layer. So we're on the first floor. I'm going to minimize this right now. If you don't know how to minimize these boxes, just click on the top bar. Open it, same thing. Okay, so we're going to draw a rectangle. We're on layer first floor, and I'll make this house. You can draw this rectangle anything you'd like. We'll make it 50 feet and by 30 feet. So the profile or the protocol for that is 50 feet, comma 30 feet. So if you notice when I click on this up here in this toolbar, it says first floor. So anything you're not sure, click on it. It's going to tell you what layer that's on. So initially, I'm going to just pull this up and give myself a 10-inch floor thickness. This is all on layer first floor. Right now, what I want to do is make this into a group. I'll show you the difference between groups and components. They actually act in a similar manner, similar to AutoCAD blocks, but there are some significant differences, and we'll get into those here in a little bit. Highlight the whole thing, select it with a window, whatever you want to do, and go up here to this little box. Well, no, I want to click on this and make group. So I right clicked on it, I get this context menu. Got to pick everything. If you don't know, you can triple click on something to pick it as well as using a window like that. Right click on it and make group. Now, one of the things that SketchUp doesn't do is it doesn't ask you for a name on this group. It does with components, but not in groups. So if you want to name them, and I highly recommend doing that, is you can track these in another section of SketchUp called Outliner, which will give you everything that you've got in terms of groups and components in your drawing. Right click, make group. So now, if I right click on this, I pick Entity Info, it's going to be the very top item in any context menu. And right now you can see in this little window it says solid group 1 and model. So it's telling me how many there are of these. Under name, just type in 1ST floor, first floor. So now I've named that group. I'm going to stick this up here with the layers. So that's a group. The idea here for me is to isolate that geometry. If you guys have drawn in SketchUp in the past and you've moved things around and found other parts of your model being deformed, this will just virtually eliminate that problem. Double click on this. I'm going to make this a very simple house. I'm going to use offset, drag this over, make a 6-inch wall. So if you hadn't noticed, what I did is I double clicked on that group to edit it. So you get a gray dash box. You're going to be doing this a lot in this process, but that's how you isolate the geometry. We'll draw a couple walls. I'm just going to use the tape measure tool, drag this out, say 14 feet. And this is what I do to lay out the drawing. And I'm not going to get into every little wall in this house because it'll take too much time. But draw your layout with guidelines. And the idea behind guidelines is for you to trace. Think of using a light pencil back in the old days, or non-print pen, anything of that nature. It's the same idea. They are not truly lines in SketchUp. They are just guides. You notice I'm using rectangles to trace these. It's a really great idea. Otherwise, you have to draw every one of these lines, and it takes a lot more time than drawing a rectangle. The next thing to do here, and this is just real quick, want to eliminate that line so that you are not carving this thing into several faces. It takes a little bit of time, but it's worth its weight in gold. So I'll complete this. I am zooming in and out right now because I don't have all the scenes set up, so it takes a minute, but I will rectify that here shortly. Okay, so I've got all that done. You can erase guidelines just with the eraser tool if you like. You can also go to Edit, Delete Guides. I use so many guides that I actually made a shortcut, keyboard shortcut for J. So I'm just going to press J. And I got one other thing here. Make sure you double click to get inside this group. Alright, so I have it. I'm going to pull this up. Let's say I got a 9-foot wall. So I'm typing in 9 feet, hitting enter. So there's my first floor. Obviously, it's not architecturally too great, but I'm going to make some changes here. I want this section over here to be a kitchen. I'm going to push-pull this out, down to 0. I think I have it. No, I didn't get it. There we go. So what I did is I push-pulled the back side of that wall through, so I have no wall there at all. Okay, so right now, all of this is in a group called first floor, right? What I want to do with this is now here's where I make a scene. Not like your little kid in a grocery store, but make a scene nevertheless. It's like a picture of the model. It records the state of the model. So to make a scene, you go to Window, Scenes, and you get a Scenes Manager. Click on the plus button, save that as a new style, and create scene. So when you create a scene, you're going to get a little tab up here at the top. It'll say Scene 1, Scene 2, whatever it happens to be in that order. You can, in the Scenes dialog, you can change the name. And I'm just going to change it to first floor. So the scene name and the group name and the layer name, if you pay attention here, they're all the same. Now let's change the first floor. So if I'm out here someplace and I want to work on the first floor, I just click on that tab. It goes right back to that view. The view can be changed at any time if you want to change it to say that. What you do to save it is right click on the tab and pick update. If you don't pick update, that scene will just go back, as you can see here, to the way it was before. So make sure you update if you're changing scenes, and you can change them at any time, update them all you want. So that's our first floor, and if you notice, that's all in that group. So conceptually here, what's nice about this is that because that's isolated, I can actually draw right on top of this and create a second floor. So what I'm going to do here is go back to layers and create another layer called second floor. Now, to make sure I'm drawing on second floor, I want to make sure I pick this little radio button. It's not necessary that you do that. You can always move things to different layers, but I like to kind of keep this clean. So I know that second floor stuff is on the second floor layer. So layers, if you don't understand what they are, they basically associate like items together, but in a different way from groups. Because, for example, layers could associate all the different cars in your model, all the different people, all the different furniture. That's what a layer does. What a layer will also do is turn things off and on. So I go back to layers here and I turn off first floor, this little checkbox. It's gone. Turn it back on. So it controls the visibility of those objects as well as grouping them together. We'll go back to second floor, which we're on, that little radio button. Make sure you press that. And I'm going to draw another rectangle right on top of this one. I'll pull this up 10 inches. Now here's the cool part. If I want to select this entire second floor, because the first floor is isolated, it's a group in itself, if I triple click on this, I will only get the portion that's the second floor. This part is not selected. You could do that with a window as well. Not quite big enough. So you notice this bottom part is not selected. So by making these groups or components, you can isolate that geometry. A lot easier to work on the parts you're trying to work on instead of the parts that you never intended to work on. That's where most people run into problems with SketchUp. I'm going to right click on this and make group. I'm making this a group, and I'll show you why versus a component. The best way to decide whether to use a group or component is if you only have one item alike in your model, make it a group. If you have numerous items alike in your model, maybe let's say fence posts or windows or things that you want to match, make it a component. Components will modify together. If you modify one, you modify them all. So a group for single items and components for multiple items. So this now should be on second floor. You can see this up here in this pull down toolbar. If you don't have that, go to Window, Toolbars, View, View, Toolbars, come on baby, Toolbars. And these are all the toolbars you'll have in SketchUp. Slippery mouse right now. So let's see, what was I looking for? Layers. So it's here. Check the one you want. They'll show up on the screen. Uncheck it if you don't want it on the screen. So second floor. Conceptually now, this and this, the first floor and the second floor, are isolated. I'm going to double click on that second floor so I can work on it. Again, I'll use that offset tool, and you can offset something by just picking the surface of that face, and we'll make that 6 inches as well. Here, one of the interesting parts about this is if I turn that second floor layer off, I can't turn off the current layer, so you're going to have to pick a different one. Layer 0 is always pretty good. And I'll turn that second floor layer off. The reason I'm doing that is I'd like to find a location of some of these walls from the first floor up to the second floor. And again, I use guidelines to do that. So use the tape measure tool. It makes guidelines. So I double click on that edge, it will project that vertically. Now why do I do that? I do that so I can actually see it through the second floor. So if I turn the second floor on now, I can see where that wall is. Here's another great reason to use layers, so you can turn things off and on. If that second floor is in your way, you can just turn it off. You don't have to move it, you don't have to hide it, you don't have to do any of that. I'll make a guideline here, and what's happening is right now I know that a wall I'm drawing up here is in the same line as a wall on the first floor. I'm going to erase these vertical lines. I'm going to do that again. Second floor off. And let's say I want to line up this edge. So I'm double clicking on that to project that line vertically. I'm going to go over here and click this, double click that, and then turn the second floor layer back on. So now I know that this is the line of the wall down below. And I think I picked the inside, yes. So you can see how quickly I can see that. I just turn that layer off or on. And I'm going to use rectangles again. Now I'm not going to get too crazy with this floor plan because it's not the point. We're not designing something. We're working on a technique here. I'm setting these wall thicknesses to 4 inches, by the way. Doesn't like my dimension. There we go. So if I want to, say, maybe create this space as 2 stories, and you'll notice again I'm using the rectangle tool to draw these spaces. Oh, I need to get inside this group. My mistake here. Now those guidelines are going to be a little bit hard to see for you guys, but they are there. Kind of made a mess of this. Let's do this on here. You'll notice the guidelines, unfortunately, they do get rather faint when you draw them outside the group and then you go inside the group to work on it. So I'm going to keep this fairly simple. If you can't find a point in SketchUp, zoom in. You'll find it a lot better. I'll just draw some other rooms over here. I'm going to be very arbitrary about it. And you can't criticize my architecture here because it's not part of this process. Here, I'd like to make a 2-story space, so I'm going to go ahead and push-pull this down through. Reference that bottom edge, and what will happen is that push-pull will match that thickness that I just referenced. Now you can see the guidelines. They're pretty clear now. We'll go ahead and put a room over here. I don't know if you can see them, but I can see them. So delete. Again, similar thing. We'll delete these intersections. What I'm trying to do with this is I'm trying to make a single face out of all these walls, and those intersections, like you can see here, will defeat that purpose. So make them all one. Wrong line. I'm just selecting these and hitting delete. So I'll erase that one. There's my second floor. I'll go ahead and pull this up. That's the point. You know, everything comes up together. 8 feet. So what do I have now? I'm going to hit J to get rid of those guides. Again, you can use delete guides if you want. I have a second floor that's on layer second floor. I have a first floor that's on layer first floor. You can see this change up here. So if you're not sure what layer something's on, just pick it. It will show you up here. That does not set it as the current layer just because you see it up here. You have to do that in the layer dialog box. Layer manager, if you will. Okay. So now I have the second floor. Let's go to the first floor. And you can see what's happening is that the part I just drew is now visible because I drew it over the top of this. So I'd like to update this particular scene so that second floor is not in my way. So all I'm seeing is the first floor. I uncheck second floor. That'll go away. This is where you update. That line needs to go away. Right click on the tab and pick Update. If I don't do that, that second floor will still be there if I go back to that particular scene. I'm going to turn the second floor layer back on. Zoom out a little bit. Hopefully. There we go. And I'm going to make a scene of this. However you want to arrange this, whatever orientation you like. I like to make sure it's all on the screen. You can make a new scene in a couple of different ways. In the scenes dialog, scenes manager, if you will, you can hit plus, or you can right click on this tab over here on the first floor and pick add. Now it doesn't name it, just names it scene 2, so you have to go over the scenes manager. I like where it says name and just change this to second floor. So what I've done is recorded this situation that the second floor is on and the first floor is on. So if I go back to the first floor tab, if I got this right, I'll just have the first floor. Go to the second floor with that tab. So you can see how quickly you can move from one to the other. I don't have to go over here to the layers box and turn things off and on. I only have to do that once. So what I'm doing is giving myself a way to move around in the model and basically predetermine the views that I want. If you do change it, make sure you update that scene. Okay, so we have these as groups. We have these on separate scenes and we have them on separate layers. That's important because now I'm controlling the whole model. Instead of having to move things around, I just go over here and pick the first floor tab and there it is. Second floor tab and there it is. Okay, I want to draw the roof. So again, I'm going to add layers, and you could pre-do these layers if you like. I tend to do them as I go along. It just makes life a little more clear for me. Here I'll call it roof. And I'm going to call this roof gable. And why would I call it roof gable instead of gable roof? This goes back to that first floor, second floor thing. If you call it roof gable, roof flat, roof garage, they're all going to accumulate in the same place in your layers manager. So you don't have to go hunting up and down through this thing because they do get alphabetized. So I have roof gable. I'm going to set that as current. You're going to see it up here again. It says it is. And this is a little trick I use for drawing roofs. Usually people can have some complications with drawing a roof. What I do, and another reason for groups, I'm just going to draw a rectangle out here. And I'm going to make that a group. Right click, make group. The reason I make it a group is so I can move this around anywhere in this model. And you may have had the problem if you tried to do this otherwise. This model down below would get all messed up, right? So I made that a group so I can shove that all over the place. I can get that to work however I like and not affect the other geometry. So this is a key part of this whole process. That for me is just a canvas to draw on. Not drawing anything in particular. With that rectangle, that will go away eventually. So how do I draw a roof? If you're not familiar, the protractor tool will draw slopes. So my protractor tool is an X. If you haven't set that stuff up and is not a default in SketchUp, I actually have a hard time even finding it there, that little yellow guy. I made it an X for a shortcut for myself because I use it quite a bit. And that's a good way to think about shortcuts. If you use a tool a lot, make a shortcut for it. If you have, or you're getting my book through this webinar, there's a whole section on shortcuts. Once you have the orientation of that protractor, hold shift to keep that orientation. And what I want to do is stick that right on the inside of that wall, which would be where my bird's mouth would be. Drag out a baseline, drag this up. I'm going to type in 8:12. That's a pitch, 8 on 12. And it can be any two numbers, doesn't have to be 12, anything you like. So you can see what's happening is I'm creating basically the bottom of the rafter. Tape measure tool, I'm going to drag this out parallel and type in 10 for the rafter depth. Actually, you know what, I'm going to make that 8. It's a small house. We can get away with 2x8s. So there's my rafter shape, pretty quick. I'm going to take another guideline over here and find the center point of this outside wall. And it looks like I'm a little short with my canvas here. I'm just going to move it over. Stay on axis here. The reason I'm moving it over is I want to find the center point of all this. So again with the tape measure tool, and you can see I'm using this to death, right? So you can see why I made a shortcut for deleting the guides, because I'm going to have a lot of them if I'm not careful. And I'll delete them as I go along. So what I'm doing here is I'm grabbing this edge, because there's no edge right here, because that's just the intersection of two groups, which is great, that's what you want, but there's nothing to reference there. I can't reference anything. It says intersection in a group, but the tape measure tool doesn't do anything. So I need that vertical line. If you go to my website, sketchupacademy.com, you'll see a whole video on doing just this. We'll put a 16-inch soffit on there. So I've mapped out the whole rafter soffit, and we'll do the fascia. Make sure we're on that layer, gable. It's good to check once in a while. Make sure you're drawing on the right layer. You can always change them, but like I said, I think it's better. So that was the fascia soffit. I'm just going to trace this. So that's my rafter. And you can see when I draw on that face, all these lines are real dark because they're not cutting that face. That's a profile. At this point, I'm going to select that group and I can just get rid of it. So I selected it and hit delete. Again, I'm going to type J just to get rid of those guidelines. Here, I want to make that a group. So I'm going to right click on it and make that a group. The only reason I'm making that a group is so it's easy to work with. Otherwise I have to go in here and triple click or pick all these edges and all the different faces. So when I make a group, I can move this around at ease. What I want to do here is make a copy. So I'm using the move tool, tapping control, and copying that out into space. I don't want to try to stay on axes here. So I stayed on the green axis. With the scale tool, you can reverse this roof. So I'm just picking the center grip, and if you type in -1, hit enter, you'll get an opposite, complete, exact, mirrored image. And I'll move this from this point at the ridge to that ridge over there. And I think I have that right. Yeah. Now here, I don't really like the fact that this is two different groups. So oddly enough, I wouldn't recommend this typically, but if you right click on it, you can pick explode. Right click, pick explode. The reason is I want to get rid of that line and I want that all to be one face. Now I can triple click on this and make it a group again. Right now I don't have a name for that group, so I'm going to right click on it and pick entity info again. Close this a little bit so you can see it. Entity info, this is the good part about 15 is all this stuff stays here, and 16 you have to open these tabs. So I don't know, I tend to like 15 better. So we'll call that roof gable. So now I have this on that layer. The roof is now on the roof gable layer. I believe that's what I put here, right? And to work on this, I have to get inside that group, double click on it, and pull this out. And I'm just going to reference that face down below and pull this out 12. So I have a 12-inch eave over here. And again, I'm not trying to teach you how to draw a house, because this is not one I would try to sell my clients, believe me. But it's a technique that I'm trying to show. Okay, so if I go to second floor, you can see what's happening is this roof that's here now, or roof, however you want to say that word, is in my way. So I'm going to turn that off. I can't turn it off because it's current, so I'll go up to layer 0 and click that gable off. And now I have to update the second floor. And this may seem, well, that's kind of laborious, but it's not. Once you get this set up, life is simple. Believe me, spending time right now will save you time in the future and save you heartache and headache. So I'm just going to reorient this to something that I like for the roof itself. And I'll go to scenes this time, hit a plus, and make that roof. And we'll call it gable, roof gable. So now if I go to second floor, that gable roof goes out of the way because that layer is turned off. First floor. Now here I have the same problem with that roof. So what I need to do is go back to layers, turn that gable roof off, and right click on this tab and pick update. So now as I go along, this should work pretty quickly. So I have the first floor, second floor, and the roof, and all I have to do is click on these tabs if I want to work on those particular elements. Okay? That's how quickly this can work. So far I have groups and layers and scenes. I don't have any components. Let's talk about components a little bit. I'm going to go in here and make a little change because I want that to be my foyer. Double click on this and we'll use the tape measure tool. Let's come over a foot. This old-fashioned house here. So that's 48 inches for an opening. I'll come up, let's say 7 feet and draw a rectangle on this. Now what's wrong with what I just did? I didn't draw that on the first floor layer. So how do I fix that? And select all this stuff. And you can see up here that it says, we don't know if you're on the first floor, we don't know if you're on the layer 0. If it's blank, it doesn't tell you anything. So do that pull down, pick first floor, and it's on the first floor. That's all you have to do, move something from one layer to the other. Push this through, reference the back side of that wall, and that matches. So push pull you can do by inference, and I'll type in J again. The reason I'm doing that is just to give this some reality. All right, so we're inside this group. I'd like to put in a place for a staircase. And here's where components come in. I'm going to do anything that I want to work on, and not just because it's a duplicate, but because it might be buried inside the model at some point. For example, if the second floor and the gable roof are on, it's kind of hard to get to that staircase, right? So I go to first floor, it's pretty easy to get to that staircase. But now it's still even a little difficult to work on that stair because it's buried down inside this model. So what I'd like to do is create a component of the staircase. And in this model here, I'm just going to make a placeholder for it. I'm going to make sure I'm on first floor. You could also make a layer for stair if you like, and maybe we'll even do that. Create a layer for stair. This is not critical, but if you want to separate that particular item out from the first floor, you can do that. And with the tape measure, I'm going to do a, let's say, L-shaped stair. 42 that way and 42 this way. And I don't know, let's say we need 7 treads this way, so we'll go 70 inches and 70 inches. And I'm just approximating. I don't have to have this perfect right now because I can change this later. So I'm on the layer stair, and I'm just going to trace this thing. And again, use rectangles. And it will show up like it's sitting on the surface, and that's fine. That's exactly what you want. You'll see that Z flashing. That's pretty common. That means we have one face directly on top of the other, but I'm fine with that. Eventually, that's not going to show. If I triple click on this stair, I can right click and make component. Now when you make a component, here's where it asks you for a name. So we'll call this stair. Make sure if you're making components that you check this replace selection with component box, because if you don't, the component you think you made in your model is actually going to the component library, and the one in your model is not a component. So make sure you check that and then create. Now the magic here, and we'll do it with the kitchen over here as well. I'll just lay this out quickly, some kind of goofy kitchen. Pardon me, all you kitchen designers. If you don't like my kitchen, that's fine. And I'm just going out 24 inches on either side and creating a rectangle here. So you can see tracing those shapes is really fast with rectangles. I'm going to erase the overlap. Now that right now is on layer stair. I'm not too crazy about that. I'm going to make another layer over here. So you can make these layers pretty much in any order you want. Make them as it's convenient. Kitchen. I'll triple click on that. Right now it says stair. I'm going to little pull down here and pick kitchen. Right click, make component, and call that kitchen. Make sure that checkbox is there and hit create. So now I have components for the kitchen and for the stairs. And why am I doing that? You ask. I'm doing that because at some point I'm going to want to work on these outside the model where they're easier to get to. So select them and make copies, move control, and drag these out someplace out in open space. I'll just separate these. They don't have to be in any relationship to the model, they're just out here. All that happens is these components are similar, but the relationship to the model doesn't matter. You can put them any way you want. Keep the orientation the same. I've had problems where somehow they get rotated and get things backwards. Well, what am I going to do with this? I'm going to zoom into this, some reasonable view. Close that so you can see this a little better. And I'm going to make a scene of this. This I call component compo farm or component farm. You can call it whatever you like. So what is that? I'm going to move this over. So if these tabs get out of order a little bit for you, I like to put that component farm all the way to the left. You can right click on it, pick move left, move right, add, delete, all of those are available to you. So if I go to the first floor, I'm here, and say I want to work on the kitchen or the stairs, I can do it in the first floor, but once I get this thing complicated enough, the model gets complex, this is going to save you a lot of time. So what do components do? You saw groups, they just kind of hold things together. You can move stuff around. It isolates geometry. A component does the same thing, except here, a component will copy each other. In other words, you make a change to one component, all the other like components in your drawing will also change. So if I did this kitchen, for example, I double click on that. So I got to get into edit mode, pick this and pull this up 3 feet. And I go back to my first floor. There's my kitchen. So what's happened here is that the kitchen's being modified. And I can change it here if I like. It's going to get modified over there. We'll do that for a second. I'll give you a little nice hint in terms of doing wall cabinets, because this is kind of slick. I don't go and draw all these things up here. I'm a real proponent for if I already have it, why draw it again? So I'm just using that lower thing as a reference for a 12-inch deep cabinet. I'm going to copy this and control, and I think what 18 inches is right, and then I'll push pull this up, say 36. So I didn't draw all this stuff. All I did was copy one surface and develop it from there. The point of doing that is if I go back here, that's in this drawing as well. So you can modify a component, either one of them. If you had 6 of them, again, you can just modify one and they're all going to change. It's the whole point of a component. The other point of a component over a group is that if I spend a lot of time on this little component that I built here, I can save this outside my model. So I click on this and right click. There is an option for save as. What that means is you can save this as another name someplace else in your computer. So if you have a library of particular items, like maybe cabinetry, maybe furniture, maybe cars, whatever it might be, click on Save As, and it'll take you to a place, here in my case, and it's going to give me the name that I already gave it in the drawing. You could change that here if you like. One of the things I want you to notice, though, is this is a .skp file, which means it's a SketchUp file, just like the one we're working in. So components within your drawing are actually a separate SketchUp file inside your current drawing. I'm just going to save this in a general place and save. So now, if I want to use that kitchen from somewhere else, I can import that. Go File, Import. Let's go backwards here, up. It should be in this place. There's my kitchen. If I click on that and open it, there it is. So I can use this in any drawing. It doesn't have to be just this drawing. But what I've done is I've saved all my work there and can reuse it. Anything you download from 3D Warehouse is going to be the same thing. It'll be a component SketchUp drawing inside your drawing. The stair, a similar element here. I'm going to pull this up. What were we? 9'10", I think. That gets me to the top of that floor. A nifty little trick with the copy tool I use is just draw one riser and one tread, 7.375 inches, I know it to be. You can calculate that, obviously, and 10-inch tread. So you just pick that and copy that on that diagonal and type, let's say, 6x. There's my stair running up. I can do the same thing this way and come out 10 inches again. So you notice I'm only drawing this stair one time. To get multiples, I'm typing 6x and hitting enter. Okay, now it doesn't look like my stair is long enough for this, so I'm going to go ahead and pull this out. I'm going to use the move tool here in this case. Could use push pull if you like. I'm going to erase that line. And let's see what I want to do here. I want to do this. Okay, that's correct. So I can move this back and line it up with that. So you can see my layout for that stair really didn't matter. I can get it right later. If I use push-pull, I can show this all the way over, show that all the way over, and now I have my staircase. If I go back to first floor, there's the stair in the model. Okay? That's the purpose of components. And using that component form, I can get to this. Now, this is going to look real simplistic, and you say, well, why did you do that? It's not hard to get to in the model. Today, right at this moment, it's not. But later, it certainly will be. I'll double click on this just to show you a little trick. Tape measure tool, pick 2 points. It'll take that guideline and run it through the 2 points. Drag this down. If you notice that line coming off there is gray, hopefully you can see that. That means it's parallel. Make that, I made that 10, I want to make that 12. One of the things I want you to notice is that I changed my mind, right? And I'll push pull this over to nothing. So I just created the whole staircase independently. I'll go back to first floor, you'll see the same thing happened over here. Okay? So now I have a second floor that I'd really like to have this staircase show up, maybe have an opening here. So with the guidelines, hopefully that's all still on stair, yep. The guidelines, I'm going to double click that vertical and this vertical. So I'd like to have an opening back here where the stairs are. And I'm going to double click, and I want to go here. Double click this vertical and this vertical. And what I'm doing is just mapping out where the stairs are on the first floor. So when I turn the second floor on, orbit this around a little bit, you can see where they are. Go back to layers, set it to second floor, because I'm going to be drawing on a second floor now. And they're going to be a little faint. Let's see, get the right one there. I'm going to unclick that for just a second. You might want to do this with lines. I'm having a little hard time for some reason seeing these. Let's use a tape measure tool. And drag this over. Alright, I'm going to give in. I'm going to draw lines. Normally this is not this difficult. I'm going to use lines instead. And I'll just basically trace these guidelines. The problem I'm having is that they're so muted when they show up on the second floor that I can't see them. So if you have that problem, just trace it with lines. You can always erase these later. And I'm going to do the same thing on this. Do the same thing on this inside corner. So I've basically mapped out where the stairs are on my first floor. The problem comes when you double click on this. It's a little easier to see the lines. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back. And actually I'm going to make a group out of this because this is where it gets interesting. Make a group. So that group is now within the second floor group. But technically not, right? What I can do here is there's a tool called paste in place. So I can move this right now. It's in layer 0, but I want to move it into that group of the second floor. So I'm going to cut this out, which is Control X, standard Windows command, and get inside the second floor group. And then under the Edit tab, there's a paste in place. So what's happened now is this staircase is actually inside this group. I can explode this now. Now you can see, I can see the lines. I'm glad I did that because it makes life a little simpler for you to see. And line tool here. There we go. And I'll just trace this. I don't know why that doesn't want to find that. There we go. So there's my stair hole. I'm going to go ahead and push that down 10. And that's probably a leftover face right there. And just erase these lines going vertically. Normally the guidelines are adequate here, but for some reason having an issue with a particular monitor at this point. So what you can see now is my first floor. We'll get rid of these lines again. I have my stair. I go to the second floor. If I orbit this around, there's my second floor opening. I'm not particularly crazy about this particular situation. I just wanted to map out. Oops. That's another good thing with groups. You saw what just happened. I erased this, and you probably have this happen to you at times. And the whole group is gone. You're probably going to notice that a whole group disappeared. So I'm going to go back, double click on this, and erase that extra line. Now I'd like this opening to be bigger, so I just mapped this out. One of the things I like to tell people is that don't worry about getting it perfect the first time, because you can change it. Use push-pull, map it up over here, and erase it. Erase the excess stuff. So now if I go to the second floor view, I have a bigger opening. Now one of the things you will notice when you do this particular process where you pile things on top of other things is you will get this line right here. That looks to me like there's a little offset in there still. Nope. I get complaints from people about, well, I don't like that line there. That's where the two groups come together. I like to think of putting this together as, parts and pieces, if you will, and you will get that line. If you double click on one of these groups, right click on it and pick hide, and see what happens. Go back to second floor. So that line's now gone. Sometimes you'll have to do that twice, one on the first floor component or group and one on the second floor group. But if those lines bother you, that's all you do. Right click on them. Make sure you're inside the group. It was highlighted, you just can't see it. And pick hide. You probably have to do this twice, once on each group. But you can make that line go away. So if it really bothers you, that's still a group. If that line needs to be found, if you say you really need to know where that is, go to View and Hidden Geometry, and it'll show you where that line is. Because really what's happened when you make it hidden, you've created a hidden geometry option, or you've changed a solid line to hidden geometry. I'm going to leave it on just so I can see it. So if you don't like those lines, hide them. Most of the time they don't bother me at all. Once you add materials, they tend to just blend right in. Okay, gable roof. That's basically the technique. The nice part with this now is I have the option of adding more stuff. So let's say I work on the first floor. Let's not. Say I want to put a foundation. I'm going to make a layer called foundation. Hit enter and put this on foundation. I'm going to draw a rectangle under here, this group, and make sure I'm on foundation. I am. So again, I'm using the opportunity to draw over that group, because it's not going to affect that group. And I'll put in, say, 48 here. Make a 48-inch foundation. I'm going to use that face and offset this, let's say, 10 inches. And I'll push-pull this up until I match that. There's a foundation. We can do more with this, obviously. What I'm going to do is go around and pick all these outside edges. Here's a case again of I already have it, so why do it again? I'm going to copy this up, let's say 8 inches. I went the wrong way. Didn't keep that on a blue axis. Didn't hurry. If I had more time, I wouldn't make mistakes, right? Okay, copy this up, stay at blue, 8 inches. 8, enter. Okay. So if I pull this out, say 4, I can double click on every other one of these. And I'm making the footing here. And it's going to reproduce what I just did. So if I go to first floor, that foundation is going to be on there, right? But I'd like to make another scene here. And I'm going to add one here. And I'll just update. That was asking me if I want to update that current style. Every time you make a scene, if you make any other change, it's going to want you to answer that question. Making a change could be as little as adding a section, something of that nature. So I'll call that foundation. I don't like this order. If I right click on this one, I can move that to the left. You also have the option in the scenes dialog where you can move things up and down with these little arrows. So I moved foundation. So you can see the order here: foundation, first floor, second floor, roof. Say I want to work on that foundation now. I can turn the first floor off, turn the kitchen off, turn the stair off, and now I have nothing but the foundation. So if I want to work on this foundation, there it is. I have nothing else in my way. What would I do with this now? I'll update the scene. So now that's what I have. So I go first floor, second floor, gable roof, foundation. What this is doing for me is I don't have to go through and pick all these layers and turn them off and on. The group is isolating all this stuff, and B, the layers are making it easy for me to turn things off and on, and C, the scenes are recording all that. So once I'm done with all of this stuff, I want these scenes to be the final library, if you will. So go back to first floor, second floor, and gable. So we've got about 15 minutes left. I want to show you what I would do with an elevation and a section. With the section, and you can easily draw this gable in here, I'm not going to worry about that. So that's my foundation. Oop, I didn't make that foundation a group. I should. If you have this problem, you don't get it in there, a nice way to select everything is with the window, kind of get it horizontal and just grab it that way. You'll get everything. Right click, make group, and I'm going to go to entity info and make that foundation. So it doesn't matter, you can name these anything you like. You see the layer name and the group name are the same. I think that's a good idea. Okay, so if I cut a section through this thing, I'm also going to want to make a scene in this case. Layers are not going to have any effect. Groups are not going to have any effect. Components are not going to have any effect. The only thing that's going to save this particular situation would be a scene. So I'll go to the section tool and place it on that face. And that'll be my active section cut. Select it and use the move tool to shuffle it around. I'm just going to move it to, let's see, let's put it where the stairs are. Now if you notice one thing that's happening here, it's also picking up all this stuff out here. And it's okay, but you don't need to keep it that way. I make this whole building, and I think this is a good idea in the long run, make that a group. And I'm going to, that's on layer foundation, that's okay, doesn't really matter. I'll name this entire building. And the point of doing this is that eventually you're probably going to want to move this building around in your model. Say you've got a bigger group of models, several buildings, something of that nature, or even just moving around on some ground. You're not going to destroy anything else. I'm going to move this to layer 0. So you can also move things to different layers in the entity info box. Just select it just like you do up here. Okay, now what I want you to see is if I double click on this whole thing, so I get inside of it and I do the section cut, what you'll notice is that the section gets isolated from the rest of the drawing. If you don't do that, everything in your model is going to get cut in that section. So it's a good way to keep that section in just the part of the model that you want. Let's put it right there. Now, a nice thing with sections, if I click, I got to get inside this. If you're outside the group, that's what happens. Get inside, you can select it. I'm going to right click and pick Align View. That aligns that view of the section with the section plane. If I go here to Window, and not Window, Camera, Parallel Projection, I get a dead flat section. I'm going to zoom into this a little closer. Again, this is the kind of thing you're going to export to AutoCAD if you like to work in AutoCAD, or Layout if you like Layout. What you see is the section plane is on. So this little guy down here is the section plane. This is the section toolbar. Turn the plane off. I turn the cut off. I go back to the elevation. So here, right click, add. Now see, I added a section and it's asking me, do I want to update the style? Here in this case, I don't. I want to save it as a new style because I don't want that section all over the place. And create scene. under the Scenes toolbar, I can now, or dialog box, manager, whatever you want to call it, I can change this to section, let's say A, hit enter. Go to the gable roof, second floor, first floor, foundation, component farm, section A. One of the things you can do in your drawing is if you're drawing something, say you want to move something, let's draw something over here. I'll make that a group. Say I want to move this over to the component farm. I'm going to right click. I'm going to move. I'm going to start moving it. I don't have to scroll. I'm going to pick this tab and it'll take me over to the component farm. So I've actually moved something by using a scene. So if you're trying to move something across your model that's going to be a little hard to find that spot, the scenes will help you there too. Come back to section A. Let's say I want to work on just the kitchen, or I want a view of just the kitchen. Go to layers and we'll turn everything off except for the first floor and the kitchen itself. My kitchen just disappeared on me. That's strange. It got in too big a hurry. It's on the stair layer. Yeah, you can see it's on stair, so no big deal. I'll change it to kitchen. You can also have, if you look at this, I'll double click inside. You can have a component or a group. You can see right now it's actually on two different things. The inside of a component or a group can be on one layer, and the group itself can be on another layer, which can be advantageous at times. I won't get into why, but let's put it on kitchen. Okay, so now if I turn off first floor, that should stay on. Good. You'll probably have some things like that happen. Turn off first floor, and I get just the kitchen. So let's say I just want the first floor and the kitchen. I want some kind of view of the kitchen, maybe for later. Something else I'm working on, maybe something to show the client. One of the sort of interesting things is this little guy. It's a camera. I call him camera guy. You might call him position camera, which is what SketchUp calls it. And you take this little guy, and normally you can just set this out here any place, and it's going to give you a view. Kind of uncontrollable. There's no way for you to really tell what that's going to be. I take the camera guy, and I place him, and I hold down the left mouse button and drag it and end up on a position where I want to look. So I'm telling it, from this point I want to see that. Now you may have to manipulate this around a little bit. But now I've determined exactly what I want to see. It's a good starting place, doesn't mean you're necessarily going to end up there. Okay, I'm going to make a new scene. And I may change this later, but it's an opportunity for me at some point to show a client, or even for myself to get back to that kitchen. I want to see how it looks in the space, not necessarily in the component farm. So we'll call this kitchen. Oh, can't do that. That's not what I wanted. I didn't want that in layers. I want it in scenes. Sorry about that. Here, kitchen view. Let's call it 1. And hit enter, and I've got it up here. So what I want you to see, and this is important, with scenes, this little list right here tells you what scenes save when you make them. Camera location, which is kind of obvious, the view you're looking at it. Hidden geometry, which, you know, is no big deal. Visible layers, though. That's what we're doing right now. We're turning layers off and on. You can see it's recording that for you. Active section planes, which you just saw. Style, which is the kind of drawing style, and we'll talk about style some other time. Shadows, whether they're off and on. Axes, location, yeah, so what? But keep in mind, everything you do in your drawing is being recorded by a scene. That's super advantageous because once you've done your settings, make a scene. Scenes are really important here because it's like a giant recorder box. Okay, I'm going to turn the second floor back on here because I'd like to see the ceiling. And I'm going to go ahead and update this particular scene. So now what do I have? Turn all these layers back on. Actually, you know what? I'm going to turn them all off, just so you can see that these scenes actually turn them back on. So everything's gone, right? Go to foundation. What happens there, I turned off the layer in the dialog box, but that scene recorded that that layer was on. So when I pressed that button, the scene came back on, or that layer came back on. First floor, second floor, roof gable, and we're getting close to time here. How are we doing, Aurora?